Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Harrison Wheaton. A little bit about me. I've been voted most likely to go to prison for the last 3 years of high school. Not something I'm necessarily proud about, but an achievement nonetheless. And I bring this up because today we will be reviewing a question created by our group for this project. How is the U.S. correctional system similar to the systems of control in Gilead? Now, to many people's surprises, the U.S. prison system has major faults that are actually very similar to Gilead, much of which is sheltered from the outside world. So today, I will be exposing the U.S. prison system and how it is actually related to Gilead. My information will be pulled from a collection of articles linked down below that you can go check out, and along with, of course, my copy of Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. So if you're ready, let's grab our books, let's grab our pens and pencils, and let's get right into it. All right. Before we get started with this prompt question, we should just go over what Gilead is and what prison is for people to get a very clear understanding about what we're talking about. So to start off, the first actual prison was a Massachusetts state prison that opened up in 1785, right after the American Revolution. Coincidentally, Gilead also takes place in the Massachusetts area at Blue Hills, as some of you may know from reading the book. But let's not get distracted. Fast forward to 2024. 363 for every 100,000 Americans are in prison, with goals to hold inmates for retribution for their crimes or for suspects who await trial. But prison serves many purposes, but rehabilitation is the main word we were going to use. And then we can get into Gilead. So the word Gilead actually translates from the Hebrew context of the Bible, and it means rocky region. So that's our comparison to Blue Hills. A little fun fact for you guys. But this dystopia's context is the women in the population have gone barren, and now the population is in danger. The future of the population is in danger. As a result, this dystopian world turns to traditional methods of life that attacked feminine freedoms by aligning the men with all the power and placing the women in traditional housewife roles. So after reading this book, Handmaid's Tale, and then reading these articles, we can see actually many comparisons in methods of control in prison systems, and Gilead, these dystopian aspects can actually be found in real world settings, in reality. One of these settings being prison. So for anybody that's babysat or worked in a management position, controlling people against their will seems like something that is next to impossible, right? Especially nowadays. But Gilead and the prison system seem to have it figured out. So why don't we explore what tactics and varieties they use to gain this control? A large array of tactics can be found, but the first one we're going to be discussing is fear. Now, as Niccolo Machiavelli, I believe is how you pronounce his name, he was a political theorist from the Renaissance period, but he was once quoted saying, "It's better to be feared than to be loved." He argues that fear is a better motivator than love, which is why, it's a more effective tool for leaders to use. And we see this very much in Gilead and both the prison system. Imprisoned, all guards are uniformed and equipped with lethal and even worse, non-lethal protection, such as mace. Trust me, it kills. But that's very similar to Gilead, who also have uniformed guards equipped with heavy machinery, lethal and non-lethal, whether it be cattle prong or whether it be a machine gun. And this in itself, this uniform acts as a fear tactic, right? Acts as a stance of power. So physical fear is obviously a method of control, right? There's been several cases of abuse from guards to inmates, brutal beatings, such on and such forth. And we also see this in The Handmaid's Tale, where These women are getting their eyes gouged out, or their ankles broken, or their fingers cut off. But what I really want to look into is both systems use mental tactics to install fear, which is, in my opinion, even greater fear. The prison's most infamous mental tactic is the use of its solitary confinement. More than 60,000 people in the U.S. are held in solitary confinement. They're isolated in small cells for up to 23 hours a day, allowed only for, that 1 hour only for showers, maybe a brief exercise, if you're lucky, a doctor's visit. They're denied calls and visits from family members. And, studies, as you can see in the article from this, show that people held in long-term solitary confinement suffer from anxiety, paranoia, disturbances, deep depression, and nationwide suicides among people held in isolation accounts for almost 50% of all prison suicides, even though less than 8% of the prison population is in solitary confinement or that type of isolation. Now, Gilead uses mental tactics similar to this. The women are seen not being able to leave, not being able to speak, not being able to act freely. They're always being watched or under the supervision of a guard or somebody in power. But we as well see the mental tactic of hanging dead bodies from a wall, the dead criminals, for everybody to see. These are all stuff that gets inside your head and installs fear, even more fear than the fear of getting beaten. And it can be seen, Offred can be seen quoted, "Buttered I lie up on my single bed, flat like a piece of toast. I can't sleep. In the side mark I stare up at the blind plaster eye in the middle of the ceiling, which stares back down at me, even though it can't see." Right? So even when she's not being watched, she's feeling like she's being watched. Like that mental fear of they're always watching me, the eye is always on me. It builds up and it makes you fearful all the time. And then we can hear her being quoted about this as well. This is talking about the wall. "As well as I don't want to be a doll hung up on the wall. I don't want to be a wingless angel. I want to keep on living in any form. I resign my body freely to the uses of others. They can do what they like with me." Right? So she's essentially, if we break this down, we essentially see the psychological toll Gilead takes on these women. She's gotten to the fact where I'm so afraid of what they're going to do to me that they can do whatever they want to me. And this instills this fear into these women, keeping everybody in check, similar to prison. Now that we've discussed how Gilead and the prison systems both use fear mentally and physically as a control tactic, let's go over the main emphasis on prison life and how it might be similar to Gilead. And what I mean by that is you can see in the article, it's quoted saying, "Reinforcing state control, prison policies and practices are designed to diminish the self and weaken the individual. Prison life largely emphasizes two things: the loss of each incarcerated person's sense of self, autonomy, and capacity to control his or her own destiny." Well, a lot of you guys right now are going, wait, that does sound familiar. Why don't we just expose it by using a quote from The Handmaid's Tale? "My name isn't Offred. I have another name, which nobody else uses now because it's forbidden. I tell myself it doesn't matter. Your name is like your telephone number, useful to only others. But what I tell myself is wrong. It does matter. I keep the knowledge of this name like it's something hidden, some treasure I'll come back to dig up one day." So we see the loss of sense of self. We see the change of herself and her autonomy and her capacity, and we see the switch of not being in her own control of her own destiny, but rather a switch of these people are controlling my destiny. Now we're going to get into the second emphasis and see maybe we can compare it again. The second emphasis mainly involves creating a new identity, one reinforced by the strict social arrangements inside prisons and the power imbalance between correction officers and incarcerated people. Light bulbs going off again? I think so. Let's read this quote from The Handmaid's Tale. It is quoted saying, "There is no such thing as a sterile man." Not anymore, not officially. There are only women who are fruitful, and there are only women who are barren. That is the law. Whoa. Reinforcing strict social arraignments are happening both in Gilead and in prison systems. There is an imbalance of power, and now these new laws are being created and enforced to create new identities for these women. Now that we've gone over how the control systems in prison and Gilead are similar by fear tactics mentally and physically, and the one of reinventing ourselves, let's go into how they can use living conditions to force control. Both prison and Gilead can be seen controlling large masses of groups by the living conditions. So we're going to first look at a quote from Offred in The Handmaid's Tale in the beginning of the book, where she says, "In the army cots that had been set up in rows with spaces between so we could not talk." Now I want you to go take a look in your note packet and look at the image of a California state prison. See any similarities? I thought so. Now let's move on to my next point. Let's take a look at a quote that describes how the handmaids walk or get exercise. "Handmaids must walk in pairs in public, partly to protect each other from advances of men and partly to make sure everyone obeys the rules." Now again, I want you to take a look at the image of the prisoners walking to and from the exercise yard. In rows, 2 by 2. Very interesting, very similar. Finally, we're going to look at how they use fencing as a method of control. Here's a quote from the book again. "The wall is hundreds of years old too. Now the gates have centuries and there are ugly new floodlights mounted on the metal posts above it, and barbed wire along the bottom and broken glass set in concrete along the top. No one gets through those gates willingly. The precaution are for those who are trying to get out." Let's just take a look at the fencing of the California State Prison in your note packet. Barbed wire, tall fencing. This is another method control, right? Cramping you but spacing you out so you can't talk. Rows of lines when you walk, fencing with barbed wires, all controls you and puts you in the system of not being able to get out and trapping you. And isn't it incredible how Margaret Atwood's description of Gilead is almost exactly the same as this one Californian prison I found as an example? Now you may ask, is Harry on the money? And the answer to that is yes, Harry's on the money. Now, at this point in the video, I know many of you guys are thinking, wow, he's really on the money. He could go to Supreme Court with this and take a dub. But I'm not done yet. These are the major points that I wanted to go over with, but there are some more minute details that you might not notice with the similarities of control in prison and Gilead that I want to go over really quickly. So drum roll, please. Lightning round. Ba-bing! First one in the lightning round. Mistreatment not seen by families or the public eye, right? In prison, you're not seeing this abuse or this degrading treatment. The outside and other countries aren't seeing these women being sexually assaulted, these women being trapped. They think they're in some sort of paradise, not a prison. Both target groups of people. The majority of prisoners are minorities, along with Gilead, who targets a minority of people that can give birth, the fruitful women. Both capitalize on incentive. If you're good in prison, they'll release you early. They'll allow you parole. By giving birth, you can't be considered unwomen, and you will be praised in society. You know what I'm saying? So, similarity there again. Continuing the lightning round, guards often operate outside the federal oversight, right? So guards often are beating inmates or stepping out of line. We see this in Gilead. We see Nick winking at Offred when he's not supposed to. We see the doctor offering sexual conduct when he's not even allowed to, you know? Moving on. Prison profits off prisoners, meaning that reportedly in 2023, nearly $4 billion came in revenue in the prison systems. Similar to Gilead, the women are producing children. The women are producing work, the Marthas cleaning and cooking, right? So both situations, the power is profiting off the subjects. And then I also finally, and my last point, want to get into the separation into groups, right? We have the wives, the aunts, the handmaids, and the Marthas, and so on. And the game, then we have the angels, the guards, the commissioners. Same thing with prison. We got the warden, the guards, the gangs, the Aryan Brotherhood, the Black Guerrilla Family, the Mexican Mafia, and all these other syndicates of gangs. They're all affiliated in groups, and they all have their role in prison. All right, guys, that's my time for today. I don't want to keep on stretching it too long. I know you're probably bored of my voice. But yeah, I just want to summarize the fact that prison and Gilead both use control methods to control their subjects, and both control methods are the same. It's pretty much copy and paste. Maybe Margaret has a little more flair, and maybe prison has a little more reality, but we can see the strong comparisons between the two. And so that's the takeaway of today on how these two systems go hand in hand with each other. Thank you so much. Shout out to my partners, Maddie and Bailey. Thank you so much for watching.